This week, it seems like this morning there was a lot like engaging, asking about the weeks, right? Like, I hope that you've had a good week. Not every week do we start off with just wanting to know how your week went, but I do hope that you had a good week. This week, talking with a couple of people this morning, this week was a trying week for me. It started out with, we had company coming in this week, and that's different for us anyway. I don't know if it is for you or not, but company coming in is different than like guests. When somebody's going to spend the night with you, you can't do like what me and Anthony have talked about recently. You can't just throw everything into one room. You have to do that deep clean. I hate the deep clean, right? Like that's just pointless, but when you have guests coming over, you have to be prepared. So we had some friends. Nefty and Brenda came and stayed a couple of nights with us, and that was fun, but it's also, I'm just, honest and transparent. It changes your routine. It's fun to be around friends, but there comes a certain time where people have more patience than I do. They're like, oh, that was fun for a couple of days. About a day is all I can handle. Like, I love you, but you've really changed up my routine. But that was good. But then during the week, I had a scare because it was just a scare. There was nothing to it. But my daughter called and was like, Dad, the police are saying there's an active shooter on campus. That's the scariest moment. Like, I wasn't paralyzed. I was down there before you could blink, but I didn't know what to do. Like just thinking that through, it was just a very scary moment. Been a busy week, but overall I would say that it's been good, just a challenging week, and now here we are. Here we are at church. And this month is an important month for us as a family, because this month we get to celebrate what I like to think of as our birthday. Now, different churches call it different things. They call it homecoming, they call it anniversary. I like to think of it as a birthday. And the reason I like to think of it as a birthday is because this October 30th, we're not just looking to celebrate the day and who we are. We look back and we're celebrating what we have done, where we have been, the people that we engaged in. I was, there with Nefty and Brenda this week, the things that God has done, but we're also looking forward. Because the best part of a birthday song is when we're wishing for many more. And we're looking forward to see what God's got. Now, the day before the 30th, we had this opportunity to do what we like to do, and that's love on our community. And on the 29th here, we're going to do some trunk or treats. Now, how's that loving on our community? Well, first of all, candy. I don't really need to say anything else. Like, candy's amazing. I love candy. If you can't tell by my physique, I'm a Reese's Cups guy, right? I love Reese's Cups. You could bribe me with Reese's Cups. But candy, the children coming up, that's going to be fun. Me and Mary have decided, I don't know what everybody else is doing, and if you want to do a trunk, then let us know. But me and Mary are doing a Star Wars theme one, and I'm going to be Darth Vader, and she's going to be Princess Leia. All right? She gets out of line, we're throwing her in jail. But we're going to do that. The kids are going to come up, but here we're also going to make an opportunity where we can love on our neighbors, because as the families come up with their children and everything, we're going to give a love gift to the parents. We're not advertising or anything, but we're going to give them some gas. We're going to give them $20 gas cards to every parent that comes up. No conditions, no strings attached. It's not like you have to come to our church or anything like that. We just want to be an example, because we really deeply want to be a part of the community that we're in, and we want to love on the community that we're in. And so that is something that we're definitely going to do. Look forward to seeing God work in that. Very excited about that. Very excited about our birthday. Looking at what God has done and looking forward to what He's going to do, because God's got some amazing work that He wants to do. And that ties in so well to where we're at in Luke, because today, that is kind of the spirit of what God's looking for in us. Today, we're going to be talking about being a watchful servant. And being a watchful servant, what does that mean? What does it mean to wait upon the Lord with the expectation that He's going to return? What does that look like in our lives? You know, we're not called to just sit in a waiting room. That's not what God expects of us. As I was thinking through my week, and I hope that you were thinking through your week, and I do hope that you all had great weeks. I really do. But as I was thinking through the weeks, let's just look at yesterday. In your mind, go back to yesterday. All day long, the things that you did. Would you have been happy during those moments if Christ had returned right then? Right then. Now here's what I think we're guilty of. I think that we're guilty of taking snapshots. That's why it's called snapshots today. I think we're guilty of taking snapshots. And do you know what I mean by that? What I mean by that is that if you ever go back through your photo albums and you look at your photo albums, everybody's smiling and everybody has come together and you only took the shot that you really wanted to keep as a memory, but that's not a true memory of that event. Like every picture that I have in our house of us and the girls going to Disney is all smiles. That's not true. That's not what the experience was really like. Okay? But we paused for a moment. We took a snapshot because we wanted it to be like a perfect memory, and it's not like that. So like when we think about being ready for God, or we think about, in circumstances, what would Jesus do? We think about these things. What we're really doing is taking a snapshot and saying, well, if he returns, then I want to be doing this. But if Christ was to return, if he had returned yesterday, how many moments during your day would you have been happy that he had returned right in that moment? Right in that moment. My children are getting so willful, and yesterday my 16-year-old taxed my patience to the very end, and I went to go pick her up, and I was so angry. She had me so upset that I was literally holding on to the wheel of the steering wheel so that I wouldn't choke her out, right? Like, she had me so angry. I wasn't going to choke her out, but she had me so angry. And I was so ashamed of myself for how angry, how she had pushed my buttons to that point. I would not have wanted Christ to return at that moment. But we don't know when Christ is going to return. And Christ tells us to be waiting upon him. And today I want us to just look at what that means. So the first part of this is Christ challenges us to be a watchful servant. And Luke 12:35-38 says, "Stay dressed for action and keep your lamps burning and be like men who are waiting for their master to come home from the wedding feast so that they may open the door to him at once when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds awake when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will dress himself for service and have them recline at a table, and he will come and serve them. If he comes in the second watch or in the third and finds them awake, blessed are those servants." He keeps saying that blessed are those that are waiting upon the master. Blessed are those watchful servants. What does it look like to wait upon the Lord? What does it look like to be ready? Not too long ago, I saw this thing and I was like, I want to experiment with this. So I took some pineapples. It's a simple experiment, like little kids can do it. It's nothing big. But I took some pineapples and I twisted their tops off and I peeled them back and I put them in some water and I grew me some roots and then I put them in a planter. And now I have to wait for like a year to see if I'm going to actually have a pineapple, right? So I did this one-time thing. This one-time thing was the whole cleaning up the top of it, getting it all ready, putting it in the water, letting the roots grow up, and putting it in the planter, and now I'm just waiting. I'm just watching. And what that means is that every couple of days, I just look over there to make sure that this planter is moist, that it has some water in it and everything, right? Now, that's me watching these pineapples with the expectation that I'm going to get something from them. That's true. I am waiting upon this pineapple. Now, would you agree with me that to watch my pineapples has a totally different meaning that if you come over to my house and you're like, Danny, I'm in a tie and I'd like you to watch my kids? Huh, right? Like watching my pineapples and watching my kids, that's totally two different things. Same verb, different meanings. Because I don't think you're going to be okay if I just look over at them every 2 days and make sure they got some water. Don't feel like that's what you meant by watching them. Right? So when the Lord's talking about we're to watch for Him, we're to wait upon Him, we're not talking about a pineapple experience. We're talking about being ready for Him and living ready for Him. 1 Peter 1:13 goes on, because all throughout the gospel, all throughout the New Testament, we have this theme, we're waiting upon the Lord. In 1 Peter 1:13 it says, therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Preparing your minds for action. Now, up in our verse, it says it doesn't matter if he comes on the second watch or the third watch. Now, in Jesus' times, Roman military occupation, this is a military term for watch. The second watch is 9 p.m. to 12. It's like to midnight. That's 3-hour period. That's the second watch. The third watch would have been from midnight to 3 in the morning. Those are very hard watches, by the way. Because by 9 o'clock, now if you're young, you don't have the same thing. But at 9 o'clock, if you've worked all day, as a soldier would have worked all day, by 9 o'clock, you haven't got your second wind yet, right? It's a hard shift to sit there when you're by yourself. And I was in the Army. We used to have this duty that we call, and I don't know, Arnie, in our Air Force, I don't know if y'all had this, but we would have what they call fire duty. And fire duty is a stupid term, because we would be in the barracks and everything, and they would set one soldier that had to stay up at night, sitting at a desk in case of fire. Smart, I guess. I mean, like, we should be able to depend upon the alarms and everything else that's going around there. But yeah, we got somebody on guard duty, but they call it the fire watch. However, the odds of that building catching fire is like 10 million to 1. And every soldier that does it knows that. They know it. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know what you're doing. You feel in your heart what you're doing is senseless. You feel like you're the only one that's not getting the rest that they need for something that's not going to happen on your watch. And so temptation to go to sleep it's immense. But what they do in the military is that they randomly have the drill sergeants come through. And when the drill sergeants come through at any time at night, you do not want to be caught asleep while you're on fire duty. That would be a very painful experience. So you are no longer really staying awake because you have this sense of duty about fire. You are staying awake because your mind's prepared for the action of that drill sergeant coming in. And I dare say that in my experience of the Army, even when we are engaged in enemy territory, that most soldiers that are on guard duty do not expect the enemy to cross over. When we were in Vietnam, not that it didn't happen, but I would dare say that we didn't expect the Vietnamese to come into the military encampment that they were guarding. They were more scared, their mind was more prepared to be caught by an officer that was walking around than they were ever worried about the enemy coming onto base. That's what you fear, and you prepare your mind. In the same way, we have to prepare our mind for action. We have to be prepared in the moment for what we know is going to happen. We can't live as if Christ isn't real, as if He's never going to return. We can't live as if this is not what He wants from us. We have to be prepared in our minds. Matthew 24:36 says, you won't know the time, but concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels or heaven, nor the Son, nor the Father only. No one will know this time. No one will be prepared completely for this, because if we did know the time, then we would be ready like we are with a snapshot, right? We would be ready to take that picture, but that's not the point. Secondly, he not only talks about watchful servants, he talks about being a watchful homeowner. In Luke 12:39-40 it says, but know this, that if the master of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have left his house to be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. You see this theme that's going all throughout the gospel? We won't know that hour, but we need to be ready. When the hurricane came, or when we thought Hurricane Ian was coming here, every single year we know when hurricane season's coming. Every single year. All of us know it. Every single year. But every single time that there's a hurricane on the Weather Channel, that they're like, okay, this is coming towards Tampa. It doesn't. But they say it might come towards Tampa. Every single time, I believe every person that lives in St. Petersburg is surprised. They're surprised, and all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I have forgotten how to buy water. I've forgotten what toilet paper looks like, and we must go load up at this moment. Nobody is prepared, right? And that's fine, the water and the toilet paper, but like propane tanks and everything else, like no one's prepared. It's hurricane season. It's hurricane season. There's certain things that we don't have to rush to the store for. At some point in time, we're like, okay, this month hits, I'm just going to go ahead and get my 2 propane tanks. If I don't need them, they will last me for months down the road, but if I need them, I won't go to the store and have somebody greet me with, we don't have any ice or propane. Why are they greeting me this way? I'd just like to hear, have a nice day, right? We don't know how to prepare. Have a friend named Devin. Devin has a zombie bag. I don't expect there to ever be any zombies, but he has a zombie bag. Conveniently, this zombie bag works well for hurricanes and everything else. But he calls it his zombie bag, right? Like it has his flashlights, his batteries, it has all kinds of stuff in this bag, and he takes this thing everywhere with him. It also has an axe, which is good for like cutting wood or killing zombies. So like he has this bag ready. And that's great. You know, he's prepared. He's sitting there just in case zombies come up out of the ground. But I challenged him on this. The bag's great, but wouldn't it be better if you were prepared? Like, I feel like let's just go down the fantasy line and just say, okay, zombies can be a reality. They cannot be. But say they could be a reality. The bag's not going to do you any good if you're not physically ready, right? Like, it's more important that you're capable of running from the zombies than it is to show them your cute little bag, right? Like, that's great, but like, you know, like, there's some things that you need to be prepared for. Hurricanes, more of a reality. It's nice to have a bag, but it's really great to have a plan. It's really great to implement these things, to put these things into action, and I think this is very much where Jesus was going when he talks about being a watchful manager. In Luke 12:41-48, and this is the longest piece that he has on this, he says, Peter says, Lord, are you telling this parable for us or for all? And I love Peter because Peter gets right to the point, right? Sometimes then when I'm hearing somebody else preach or something like that, I'm like Peter. Is this message for me? Are you speaking to us? Are you speaking to everybody? Peter gets right to the point, and Jesus said, who then is the faithful and wise manager, whom his master will set over his household to give them their portion of food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that servant says to himself, my master is delayed in coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and eat at an hour he does not know. And he will cut him in pieces and put him with the unfaithful. And the servant who knew his master's will, but did not get ready or act according to his will receive a severe beating. But the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating, he will receive a light beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required. And from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more. Pretty serious that Jesus has this expectation in our lives that we're living for him. An expectation, not a hope, not a desire. There's an expectation that Jesus wants us to take this walk with him very serious and to live in such a way. To be prepared, not just because he's coming, but because we belong to him. Because we are his servants. And it's very important in our lives, because this is what we've been dealing with through Luke 11 and Luke 12 and the passage last week and everything. It's very important in our lives to realize that our lives are meant to belong to Christ. And what that means is that we're not living our lives in our will, but in his. It's not that we're trying to pervert God's will to match our will and our comforts and our desires. We're called to live in his will. And that's part of this preparedness that we have. In Luke 12, we're in Luke 12 now, but Luke 12, 13 through 21, I preached a couple of weeks ago about the parable of the rich fool and how we're not to be tied to the possessions of the world. Last week, Pastor Anthony preached on not to be tied to the expectations of life and to give our anxieties over, because those things can bind us. Luke 21:34 tells us, but watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with the dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that day come upon you suddenly like a trap. Those things in our lives can become traps. They can become chains. They can weigh us down. And even when we're trying to break free and we're free of most everything else, those chains can remain. And they prevent us from being not only prepared, but they prevent us from living the life that Christ called us to live, the fullness of life that he desires for us. They weigh us down. I used to have, my father had a company where he had heavy equipment, and we would go in and we would clear up land and put roads through it and stuff. In South Georgia, people would buy large sections of land. Down here, a large parcel of land's like an acre. If you find an acre in St. Petersburg, you are rich. I'm talking about like thousands of acres, right? They would buy these thousands of acres tracts, and they want roads put through them. They would want us to put lakes on them or ponds on them and different things like that. So we had excavators and dozers and stuff. And we would go through there doing that. But one of the coolest things about that job is that you would go through there. There would be no roads that you could discern through some of these pieces of property. And all of a sudden, you're at an area where there's this just rotted down house and everything's growing up around it. You don't even know which direction they would have come through back in the day to the house and stuff like that. You don't know why they abandoned the stuff. You go to some of these houses and they'd have these big old iron cauldrons still sitting. Now, who abandons this type of stuff? What happened? Just trying to imagine what happened in the day that they're like, you know what? We've outgrown this house. And we're just gone. We're going to go somewhere else. Or did we just all pass away at the same time in this house? I don't know, right? But you would find these locations and and it would be like trying to imagine their lives. But a couple of times when I was younger, we'd find these places, and around some of the trees, you'd find these big old chains around the trees. I'm talking about big link chains around the trees. I assumed that they were super barbaric, and this is where they put their dogs, and the dogs just be tied there with these big old chains, and they'd have to have big old necks to haul these chains around. But one day there was this, because some of our jobs required the government to come through and inspect it, and there was this health inspector that came through. I know, not the same kind of health inspector that comes through your restaurants, but there was an inspector that came through, and he was, because on these houses they had to inspect the wells, because they would have wells that were done, all this stuff. He came through and he told me something, and I looked it up, and I was like, man, that's crazy. But these chains that you would find at these old houses were actually the remedy that they had at the time to rabies. They didn't know how to treat rabies. And so when a family member would get bit by a rabid animal, they would just go crazy. And they didn't have any place for them. They didn't have any way to treat it. And they would chain their loved one out in the back because they couldn't manage them. And out of all the things in these old abandoned places, everything was falling down, and sure, the chain had rust on it, but it's like the last thing. Sometimes we would go to properties and we would see a big chain around a tree, and I wouldn't even be able to discern where the house was. I'd have to start looking because everything else had disintegrated, but the chain was left. I don't think it's any different on our hearts. I don't think it's any different when we give something and we allow something worldly to chain itself to us and attach itself to us. That's one of the lasting things in our life. It weighs us down from being the true, new, spirit-filled person that Christ wants us to be. And it's the one thing that we don't want to deal with at all. It's too painful. Sometimes it's too hard. It's got such a grip on our life that we don't want to deal with it. We don't even know how to deal with it. And so we don't deal with it. And we leave it. Being prepared for Christ is, whether that's a sin or that's a hurt or it's a need for forgiveness, it's breaking those chains. And if it's sin in our life that has a grip on us because we all are sinners, if it's a sin that's in our life that's so hard to deal with, it has such a grip on us, we have to come to a point where we repent. That's how we break the chains. If it's a hurt that someone else has caused, it requires forgiveness. And we have to be mindful of the fact that forgiveness isn't so much for the other person as it is for us. Releasing the grip that they have on us, releasing the grip that pain has on us. And going forward in our lives and being ready to live like Christ wants us to live. Revelations 3:3 says, remember then what you received and heard, keep it and repent. If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come against you. You got to let those things go. You got to break those chains. You can't allow them to continue to keep you trapped. Repent. Wake up. And put into practice what you're taught. 1 Thessalonians 5:6 says, for you are all children of light, children of the day. We are not of the night or of the darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. Do what you're taught to do. To represent Christ in all things, to represent Christ in every manner. To remember, as we talked about not too long ago, that in everything that I do, I am doing it for the Lord. I'm doing it for the Lord. Some of you have laughed at me. Some of you have taken it seriously, whatever. I tell you that when I need cheering up, I go back to that 80s little kid that used to wear the blue jean jackets and listen to heavy metal and stuff. So I put on my thing, I'll put Metallica on or something like that. And I don't know why. It sounds like that should make me even angrier, but that'll be like cheering me up, right? Now, as an adult, I'll put on my headphones, I'll be listening to something like that, I'll be cutting my yard and everything, and I realize that in this moment, I'm listening to, let's just use Metallica again. I'm listening to Metallica, I'm doing my own thing, and nothing ever seems to happen. And you're probably like, what are you talking about? The yard gets cut. But I'm telling you, every single time I go out in my yard, and I mean this, every single time, it drives my wife crazy. Every single time I go out in my yard and I'm doing my task and I start praying, and I do that quite often, it seems like every neighbor in our neighborhood comes by. Like they have been waiting for me to cut my grass all their life. They come by and they start wanting to talk. They have questions. I have neighbors that like I have introduced myself to 3 years ago and said I'm a pastor. They never mention it. They never bat an eye. As a matter of fact, I think they hide from me in the grocery store. But they'll come by and I'm out there cutting the yard and they'll be like, didn't you say you were a pastor? I want to pray about this. Never fails. Whatever I'm doing, cutting the grass is a very menial job. It's nothing. But when we do it, and what we're doing, we're giving it over to God, and we're giving that moment over to God, He does amazing things in those moments. And we'll never feel fuller, and we'll be never more complete than we're doing things in God's will. No matter what it is. That's being ready. It's not just waiting and watching and looking for the pineapple to grow. It's being active in the things that we know we're supposed to, in the things that we know if Christ comes at this moment, because I'm expecting Him to come. I'm expecting the return of God. That's going to be the most glorious thing. I don't want to be tied to this world. I don't want to be tied to this world. Somebody said something the other day. No, I know what it was. I was watching something and they said that they had like cancer or something. They said that they were expecting this show to come out on Netflix and they were very upset because they felt like they might not be still alive when this show came out. And I thought about it, and this is not the context that they said it, but sometimes is this not true? Is it not true that there are things that are happening in the world and we're like, well, I hope Jesus don't come yet. Marvel's about to release their 400th movie and I'd like to see it, no, I'm not tied to the things of the world. The moment that Christ comes back, it's going to be the greatest moment in history. This is what we're looking forward to. This is what we're yearning for. It's going to be so amazing. We don't want to be tied to this. This morning, is there anything that you feel like is tying you down, chaining you to a tree this morning? If there is, this is your moment. This is your moment. It's not that you got to pick up the hammer and the spike and break that chain yourself. That's not even what's asked of you. It's to give it over to Christ. It's nothing to Him. So this morning, if you have something to give over to Him, give it over to Him. He's going to come up here this morning and He's going to